Hi, it's me. I'm back. And today I'm going to be talking about misogyny. Misogyny and Nihachu. I think this video is going to end up being shorter than my other, well, definitely shorter than my last one, but just shorter in general than what I generally plan on making on this channel. That last video killed me and is absolutely underrated for the amount of effort that I put into it. I swear I spent like over 2 weeks just drafting, like, the script. So, because of that, I'll be linking it down in the description. You can check it out after this video. I will be referencing a couple things from it, but you don't need to watch the previous video to understand what I'm gonna talk about in this video. Also, while I have your attention, I wanted to say thank you, because I kind of get that I'm like not really consistent about what I talk about, but I can promise you that I am equally as passionate. And so I'm really trying to make some of the content for you that I would enjoy watching, and the fact that you guys are actually like watching it and stuff, that's weird. You're all a little insano, just like me. We're quirky like that, and genuinely thank you so much. I'm really enjoying doing this, and I'm glad that you guys are enjoying watching it too. How do y'all put up with me? How do you do that? How do I put up with me? I am really grateful though, and I do hope that you can enjoy my dumbass putting my heart and soul into whatever random ass content I want to talk about. Think about the ideas that I present and let me know the conclusion you come to. There's a comment section below for a reason. I want to hear what you guys have to say. Also, I did want to mention that when I point out certain... every video. Anyways, I wanted to mention that when I point out certain thought processes and certain opinions, and I say that they are misogynistic, I'm not meaning to say that people who have these thought processes are necessarily misogynistic. Anyways, today's tea that I've brought is going to be this black tea. It's called Keeman. It's really good. Okay, I've decided I'm going to light Dark Blue Night. It is a Bath & Body Works candle. It smells clean, which I really like. I appreciate a good clean smell. I'm sure after seeing me behave like this, you're probably like, wow, God, you really were dying in the last video. And I was. That was the first day that I had my voice back since getting bovid. I cannot say that word. That was the first day that I started to feel somewhat better, and so I showed up and I was like, I'm good to film, this'll be fine, and then I had no energy. Anyways, now that we have our candle lit and we have our tea, the vibes are immaculate as always, so I'd recommend you light a candle, grab some tea, grab a snack, and get cozy. Because we're gonna be talking about misogyny. So, if you didn't watch my last video, that's fine. I'll catch you up to speed on the things that you need to know in order to properly know what's happening in this video. So firstly, in order to examine which characters I would consider a villain, because I was taking a look at sympathetic villains in that video, I need to first define what a villain was, which is a bit more of a difficult question when talking about the Dream SMP, because you normally think about the villain as the antagonist, or the person who opposes the protagonist. Problem with streamers though, everybody's point of view, basically everybody's point of view for almost every event was available. Which isn't great, because I was trying to find the villain and I had to set out some criteria for myself. You get what I'm saying. I needed to figure out what makes a villain. So basically, in order to solve this issue of who was and wasn't a villain, I created the SVT, or also known as the soupe villainy test. Pulling from a couple sources talking about what makes a good villain, I found a couple criteria that I found is what makes a villain in general, what people expect a villain to be. And those 3 criteria were: character must have a capacity for evil and a willingness to do bad things. They must have contributions that are relevant and game-changing to the story. And finally, they must continually make the wrong choices even when given the choice to change. Now, the reason that I don't consider Niki's character to be a villain is because she doesn't pass the SVT. She doesn't meet all of the criteria. She had a willingness to do bad things. She literally did try to lure Tommy to a nuke site to kill him, to explode him. That's a bad thing. Murder is generally a bad thing, generally. This story gets complicated, but generally, murder is seen as a bad thing, especially when the person you're murdering is generally viewed as, like, the main character. Which also leads into point 2, that her contributions are indeed relevant and game-changing. So she has both of those going for her, because she's trying to kill the main character. Or at least she was. She doesn't meet the 3rd requirement, actually, which is interesting because she did change. She did make the right choices. She was given the choice to change, and she did. And that's something really distinct about her character, and it shows progression in her character that not a lot of other characters on the Dream SMP are willing to do in terms of growth. She got better. She is not a villain in my opinion. She changed. She had villainous actions, but she did choose to be better. And that's a very big difference between her and most villains on the Dream SMP. Now, that being said, the internet was very obviously captivated by her villainous acts, by her more evil acts. As they were happening, people were like creating fan edits, fan art. Oh my god, the fan art, it's so good. Chef's kiss. God, I loved the fan art in that era. Unfortunately, it wasn't as popular as a lot of the more main characters of the story, right? Which is extremely unfortunate though, and really disappointing because she had a really good story emotionally. You know, she had a really good emotional story of moving forward and moving past grief and actually getting over anger and hurt in a healthy way and learning to live with it, which I feel that is really important, and it's extremely underrated by a lot of the community. But overall, it still was very well received and people were very invested in what was happening. A lot of people were obsessed with and on board with Niki's character finally getting back at people, finally seeking out that revenge, because her character had been very steady and very consistent, and a character that had just kind of dealt with things. And then finally she was like, fuck you. So, what was it about this character arc that really captivated her audience? Well, obviously, part of it was the more outward and destructive means, which she finally started expressing her anger. A lot of people might find it cathartic in a way, because Niki's character was driven by the fact that she was hurt, very similar to Quackity's character. She had been hurt by people, and by the world specifically, and been pushed aside, and she was tired of feeling like that. I get that. I feel that. You know, people hurt. People feel hurt. It is very easy to sympathize with and relate with, in a sense, Niki's character. It felt cathartic for a lot of people to finally watch somebody like them doing what they wanted to do. Her character really was in need of justice, and so this arc really brought that forth. Like, she had been dealing with stuff, and then finally, she was able to say, hey, I've been dealing with stuff. Piss off. To me in particular, I see Niki's character story as commentary on sexism, and I know that's probably not a more popular take, but I really do see it as a reclamation of femininity and taking what it means to be a woman in a society that doesn't want you to be who you want to be, and basically saying to that society, fuck off, I'm gonna do what I want. I mean, when she had gone through things, it is mainly obviously said that she had gone through these things because there were men in power in this hierarchical, patriarchal system who were using their power to diminish her and to devalue her and take her worth away. And I feel like her combating this in the way that she did by embracing who she was and embracing the fact that she's allowed to be hurt and embracing the more feminine sides of being hurt. I feel that that is a strong story of combating sexism. I don't know whether it was written with that in mind, but I do feel that that interpretation that I've come to is valid. It's mine. I'm entirely biased here in saying that it's valid, but I mean, I thought it and I was like, yeah, no, that makes sense in my brain. So there's that. She established that she's allowed to speak out against tyranny, and she's allowed to participate in destructive behavior, and she's allowed to do these things that other characters are allowed to do without the caveat of it being, and she's a woman. And she took back her narrative. That being said, that again, that's just my own interpretation of it. I'd love to say that's where this story ends. That Niki overcame the patriarchy and showed everyone that she's exactly who she wants to be without the caveat of it being that she has to do whatever she does with, and she's a woman tagged alongside. But that's not where it ends, unfortunately. A large part of the fandom had a very certain idea about how to interpret this story, and we're gonna talk about that and how it might be rooted in a bit of misogyny. That's right, I'm coming for the fandom now. I'm kidding. I joke. In all seriousness though, the way that a lot of the fandom talks about and treats Niki's character does kind of set off some red flags in my brain. Just a little bit. Just a little bit. And it might be showing a couple of their true colors, one of which, you know, you have some blues, you have some purples, some yellows, oranges, a little bit of misogynistic thought in there. The misogyny might be internalized, but I do feel that the fact that these opinions are serving the patriarchy, it's something to take into consideration, right? Like, it can't just be ignored. And it may not even necessarily be their fault. It may not be their fault if they were never informed that they had to do this deeper level of thinking and really criticize their way of thinking about women, and specifically women in media. And I do want to mention that a lot of people don't do it out of malice. A lot of it is very innocent. So please don't get angry at people with this type of thought, right? Like, it's generally not their fault. We live in a society that highly encourages people to just give into the patriarchy, specifically cis men and cis women. It is extremely, extremely easy to give into the patriarchy. I mean, it sucks to be them, though, because I am still going to be criticizing these levels of thought, these types of opinions, because they are valid criticism, and I feel that this is an important conversation to have. So, let's talk about it. I have seen a large group of people sort of hating on Niki's character in a sense, feeling that she hasn't earned or she doesn't deserve her villain arc. We talked about this, you know what I mean. When I say villain arc from here on out, you know what I'm talking about. But the thing is, this line of thinking genuinely believes that Niki hasn't gone through enough as a character to hold such strong emotions and such strong opinions and to have such strong reactions to what's happening to her. They feel that she hasn't earned it. They feel that she hasn't gone through enough to hold a grudge against Tommy, and that she hasn't gone through enough, especially to kill him. And while I can sympathize with the latter version more, because, I mean, again, murder is not great, in my opinion, I found that Niki's character wasn't as much trying to kill Tommy because he deserved it, but rather because bad things seemed to happen wherever he showed up. And yes, he was involved in a lot of them happening, and she saw that and she thought, well, I could stop people from being so sad and stop bad things from happening if he were simply gone. Which I don't know if she's entirely wrong about, but like, murder is a bit of a jump, I agree. Obviously, this doesn't justify her trying to kill him. Obviously. But it is important to note that in her mind, getting rid of Tommy would mean that people would finally be happy, and that all of this stuff that she had gone through, nobody would have to go through again. And Niki's character had to put up with so much through the whole story, and still does. Like, while everyone was listening to Wilbur talk about, oh, we should maybe go into political revolution, oh, we should do, and he was like going off about potentially blowing up a country and all that, and everyone was like, yeah, politics. Niki was on the ground. She was doing the work. She was putting in the effort. She was out there adamantly being politically defiant against Schlatt and how she saw his dictatorship. Which, by the way, is a valid point of view. I know a lot of people were like, oh, but Manberg did so many great things. It was a dictatorship, though. It became a little bit of a tyranny. And Niki was willing to speak out against that. She was adamantly and outwardly speaking out against the Manberg presidency. And she faced the consequences for that, with Schlatt specifically targeting her more often than he was targeting Wilbur. Because with Wilbur, Schlatt was kind of like, go somewhere else. I don't want to see you. But Niki, he was like directly involved in making sure that she was suffering. Is that my cat? Hold on. I gotta get her. Alrighty. But overall, yes, she was involved in politics far more than Wilbur was, because Wilbur kind of just didn't really do a lot before showing up on the 16th, quite honestly. Like, if you take a look, he just kind of sat there and brooded and thought about doing things, but he didn't do much. And the fact that people watched her go through that and go through all of this stuff before the 16th, be directly targeted by the president, and like, in concrete ways, watched her decide, I want to make this country better. Go through with the political revolution, be on the side of people she thought were allies, and then have a solid group of people from that ally group decide in the end to betray her and to blow up everything that she loved in front of her? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? The fact that on Doomsday, when she burned the Lemon Tree, everyone was like, oh my god, how could she harbor so much hate for the new government? That's why. It's because, it's literally because everyone she thought was allies were not allies. She had constantly been beaten down and betrayed. She has such valid reasons for wanting to be a villain. Are you kidding me? And this difference in perceptions can be boiled down to misogynist thought. I'm sorry, not to bring it back to this, but when you're having these types of thoughts about how Niki doesn't deserve her villain arc, I want you to sort of compare, you know, the men characters and then the women characters and what they've gone through and how you feel about each. Doing that type of work makes it seem like it's unnecessary, especially because it is, in a sense, it is a valid opinion to have that Niki didn't deserve her villain arc. But that being said, she had gone through so much more than a lot of the people who weren't scrutinized for their villain arc. And this particularly can be rooted back to the sort of idea that a woman's emotions, specifically anger, will always be less than a man's emotions. Again, specifically anger. And this isn't always the case. Obviously, the patriarchy is super shitty towards men concerning emotions. They aren't allowed to feel sadness or hurt or fear or anything. Honestly, it's really bad. But specifically, a lot of women's anger is very easily dismissed by misogynistic thought, internalized or otherwise. And so when I hear that Niki doesn't deserve her villain arc, part of me just remembers this type of thinking that is trying to say that women's anger is inherently lesser or of lesser value or less valid than a man's anger for the same reasons. And that she's overreacting and all of that, you know? Do you see why I kind of like a little bit icky on that? As well, one of the other most popular opinions that people have about Niki's character is that she's so brave and she's so capable and look at her doing this thing that everyone else has never done before and like, you know, she's girl bossing, she's out here getting stuff done. And like, don't get me wrong, I do prefer seeing this type of thought as an alternative to the last one. I definitely prefer this one. But there's a specific way that I've seen a couple people talk about this, because don't get me wrong, again, I love Niki's character, and I do love the story that she tells. The thing is, her character progression was really great, and is underrated in my opinion, but she hasn't done much different from the men around her. She hasn't done much different from the people around her. And when they look at her and they say, look at you, you're so capable, look at you getting this stuff done, it does kind of give that vibe again. It does give that vibe for me that they're viewing like sort of women as less capable, right? She's doing the sort of things that everyone else around her is doing. She's having a progression with her character that isn't necessarily uncommon with those around her. And they're all great character progressions, don't get me wrong. But when I see people specifically pointing out Niki, specifically praising her for doing like just what everyone else is doing in a sense, like being like, look at you, you have your villain arc. Oh, look at you, you're getting stuff done. There's a certain tone of that feels sort of infantilizing and sort of like saying that she's less capable inherently because she's a woman. You should praise her because look at her, she got this done and she's a woman. Do you see what I mean? I mean, I could be looking too much into that, but I really want to talk about it because there is that aspect of even when you're doing your best to support creators, and I know that I can be guilty of this as well sometimes, I'm trying to work on it, treating them as what they're doing is inherently more impressive because they're a woman when they did it. Obviously, it's not that outward. I know it's internalized a lot of the time, and it's not intentional, which is why I feel bad about criticizing this type of thought, but it really does deserve a critical look. It does deserve to be looked at critically, and it does deserve to be thought about with the same amount of criticism as any other sort of thought formed by internalized misogyny. I'm not criticizing Niki's character per se. She's doing great. I love her. I love the story that she tells. I'm trying to criticize the way that people are interpreting it and the way people are talking about it. Because it's kind of weird, champ. It's kind of weird, champ. The fandom will look at Niki standing up for herself and go, OMG girl boss. Niki doing her best, let's go. You know, it's like, you're so strong for doing this. With the sort of subtext of saying you're so strong for doing this, being you're so strong for doing this because you're a girl, you're so strong. You know, it's It's weird, champ. It's a little weird, champ. I'm sorry. Not to be that bitch, but it is. It really does feel like people are forcing Niki's character into a certain label or a box of what they want her to be and what they expect her to be. And the second that she steps out of this uwu soft girl persona, everyone's like, oh my god, look at you. So proud of you for expanding your boundaries beyond just being a woman in our eyes. And I know I know it's not that. For a lot of this thinking, I know that that's not what people are really going into it with, but there is a level of misogyny that is encouraged to be internalized in our society, and taking a critical look at it can only be beneficial. If Niki wanted her character to be that soft uwu, girl, then that's fine, and we would support her with that. The main issue I have here is that the fandom seems to be creating a role for her that's just based purely on the fact that she's a woman, and then anytime she steps out of their expectations of what a woman should be, they give her intense amounts of praise, right? For breaking roles that they gave her. So, obviously, we have to move forward somehow. When we recognize a problem in our society, we should be taking steps to work past it or improve the life of those suffering because of this problem. We should be looking to go forward from it. Stagnating is probably not a great thing. Like, recognizing a problem and being like, oh, that's there, and then not trying to do anything about it, right? Now, obviously, we can't expect the actions of an individual and the changes in behavior of an individual to suddenly make everything better and it cures sexism, right? We can't expect that. But that being said, a paradigm shift, in a sense, is just a bunch of individuals changing behaviors, right? In a social paradigm shift, it is the majority of individuals changing behavior in a certain direction. And so every person doing what they can will help in the end. It may not change everything, and you shouldn't put the pressure on yourself to change everything, but it can help. So, how do we do it? How do we move forward? How do we improve ourselves? Well, luckily, I have a couple first steps if you're new to this whole trying to unlearn misogyny thing. Firstly, I would encourage you to learn to recognize misogyny in online spaces. Really critically look at these more popular views and opinions of women characters as opposed to men characters who are similar. Look at how people are treating them. If there's any difference, take note of that. Learning to recognize the problem and see the problem for yourself is the first step in trying to improve it. Secondly, if you have the emotional energy, I understand not a lot of people have the emotional energy for this right now, but if you do have the emotional energy for this, try to look within yourself to recognize any misogyny that you may be perpetuating, any systems you may be perpetuating. This can be internalized or otherwise. To cause this paradigm shift, we need individuals to recognize the behavior they should change and try to do their best to improve. Obviously, you shouldn't expect yourself to be perfect, and I feel like a lot of people will specifically look at people trying to improve themselves and be upset with them for not being perfect in the first place, and I don't think that that's right. So, I do encourage you to be kind to yourself when doing this, and to be patient with yourself, because oftentimes the misogyny, if it's internalized, is not your fault. Society pushes a very highly patriarchal? Words are hard. We live in a highly sexist society. So I really do encourage you to be kind to yourself through this process. Be patient with yourself. You are learning, you are growing, and the fact that you're taking the time to learn and grow shows that you care and that you're not a bad person. You're not necessarily inherently a misogynist for having misogynistic thoughts and having patterns and behaviors that are driven by the patriarchy. You're not a bad person because of that. Still, it is important that you do confront these parts of yourself and you do try to change them. In changing these biases, you can work towards a better society and ensuring that you don't yourself perpetuate these sexist ideals. And thirdly, don't be afraid to theoretically call people out. Now, this doesn't mean I want you to go on Twitter and if you see somebody saying, OMG, Niki is such a girl boss in her villain arc, OMG, I wouldn't say you should quote retweet them and be like, OMG, you're a misogynist. That's not what I mean by calling people out. When I say you want to theoretically call people out, I mean that you want to call them out without calling them out, if that makes sense. Maybe this is just me being non-confrontational, but I feel like if somebody's perpetuating sexist thoughts, particularly if you can tell it's internalized sexism, I don't think going to them and calling them a misogynist is a great idea, because chances are they're not really a misogynist or anything. You are just giving them information to work with, right? Things like, I highly encourage you to have conversations like these and about this type of topic with people that you know. Talk to your friends. I mean, I don't know, maybe my friends are just weird, but my friends and I love discussing politics, and specifically, we love talking about politics within ourselves and our group and becoming better versions of ourselves. But I really do think that having these types of conversations with people that you know is important, because if you give somebody the tools and the information about, you know, overcoming internalized misogyny without saying you have internalized misogyny, then they might take that and they might use that going forward. They might have these types of conversations with people with other people they know as well, and then it can spread. Alright, now that you've seen my little analysis video on Niki and the fandom, I'm going to do something else. You know what I want to do? I want to sit down and I want to have some soup. I want to sit down, I want to grab myself a bowl of soup, I want to eat my bowl of soup, and then I want to go to sleep. Really, honestly, I wanted to do something productive earlier, but I've done sports already today. If you enjoyed this video though, I do highly recommend subscribing. And you can always unsubscribe later. It's easy and free. I'm doing my best, and you clicking that down below would give me a shot of dopamine in the brain. And while I'm selling my soul out to the internet, I would also encourage you to leave a like. So I hope you have a wonderful and lovely rest of your day. Oh my god. Has that been like that the whole video? Fuck. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I hope to see you back at my next video. Bye.